Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Ben here, and today I am doing a video about the Philadelphia 76ers, and I think an interesting pattern that I noticed that arose with the team basically over the last year, and I want to talk about it. And basically this pattern is how this team is really the exact replica of what the Shaq and Penny team of the Orlando Magic was in the 1990s. So just a little bit of background as far as that team goes. Shaq was drafted to the Magic in 1992. Penny was drafted to the Magic in 1993. And then they made the playoffs in 93-94, and they lost, I think, in the first round. And then in 1994 to 95, they had this great season. They had 62 wins. They got to the NBA Finals. They did lose in the finals, but everyone thought that they were really promising and that they'd win NBA titles for years to come, and they'd be the next big thing in the NBA. And it didn't end up happening. The next year, they again won 60 games, actually, and they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, but then they lost there. And then at that point, Shaq's rookie contract was up, and basically the Orlando Magic didn't offer him as much money as he wanted, and the Lakers did, so he went to Los Angeles, and that was the end of that. But basically the team was built around Shaq, the big-time center, and then a really tall point guard in Penny Hardaway, who is 6'7". Not a great three-point shooter, but really good at distributing the ball and really good athleticism. And so he finished at the rim really well, and so then those were the two main pieces, and then around them you had Nick Anderson and Dennis Scott as two of the main other scorers on the team. Both guys that were really good for their three-point shooting and spacing the floor, because those other guys weren't good at spacing the floor really. And then you had Horace Grant, who was sort of just like the steady veteran presence, and he was a pretty good player at this time, around 15 points a night, 8 rebounds. So not all-star numbers necessarily, but really solid starter numbers. And so looking at this team, I was looking at Philadelphia, and I've just been thinking about them a lot, and they almost have the exact same structure of team. If you look at it, so the Orlando had Shaq, and Philadelphia has Joel Embiid, the big-time center, who's a really physical force and really hard to stop down low, and overall just really talented. And then you look at their second-best player, Penny Hardaway on Orlando, is very similar to, I think, Ben Simmons on Philadelphia. Ben Simmons, a very tall point guard, not really a good shooter, but has really good athleticism, so he finishes at the rim pretty well, and then he also is really good at distributing the ball. So that's very similar in that they're both extremely tall point guards. And then you look at the sharp shooting around them. Dennis Scott and Nick Anderson are similar to me to Robert Covington and Dario Saric. And then you have the veteran who's like really good, but not all-star level, just like a really solid starter. I'd say that was Horace Grant on the Magic, and on this Philadelphia team, it's J.J. Redick. So yeah, I think that is just a really interesting, not necessarily exact one-for-one, because I'd say Philadelphia has a bit of a better bench, and Orlando didn't really have much of a bench at all, besides a few good defenders, but no offensive six men or anything. But I think it's an interesting comparison, at least, just to see how they're so similarly structured. And honestly, I think that their success in the NBA will be pretty similar. Not saying that Philadelphia will break up within the next year or two, because I don't think that that's the case. But I do think that there'll be a similar talent level, and that this Philadelphia team will never be the best in its conference. Like Orlando was technically the best in its conference for 1 year, but that was the year that Michael Jordan was not in the NBA, or when he did come back, he wasn't really himself, so they were the best that year. But in the year that Michael was back to playing shape and like really trying hard, that season they were the second best team in the East. And really for years to come, I see this Philadelphia team coming in at about second best in the East to Boston. Or possibly third as far as Toronto being around, but about the same level as Toronto. So really about the second best team, and if Kawhi leaves, for sure the second best team. But I don't really see them getting over the hump. With this current cast, I feel like they definitely have a ceiling, because that Orlando Magic team actually did, I thought, have a ceiling, and I think that this team does in the same way. And I made a previous video on it, and I'll bring it up again here, but it's the idea that they don't have a guy that can just take the ball and get a bucket when you need it. I talked about this in the video where I talked about teams that build around point guards and big guys. They just lack a certain, like, shot creation is a struggle on these teams. So like Ben Simmons, you could say, well, he can make his own shot. He's tall and can drive to the rim really well. But if you put a big guy in the paint, like a center in the paint, along with the guy guarding Ben Simmons, then his offensive game is limited, because he'll get blocked off when he goes to the rim, and he'll be ineffective. And then people can sag off on him from jump shot range, basically outside of the paint. So then his offensive game really is hampered by that. And not that Penny was better offensively at his prime, I'd say, because Ben Simmons has not hit his prime yet. But Penny was also a guy who had only been in the league like 1 or 2 years when he was actually hitting his prime. So for that reason, I'm making the comparison, because they were both really young in their careers. Penny had a little more of a jump shot, not much better, but sort of a similar thing, where his main scoring came from the painted area and driving to the hoop. And then as far as the Shaq and Joel Embiid comparison, Shaq was obviously a better player at this point in each of their careers. But I'd say Joel does have a few things up on Shaq, in that Joel's a bit of a better defender than Shaq was. I think Shaq put in more of his effort on offense. He was a decent defender. He wasn't bad by any means. He was not bad. But Joel's like an all-defensive team caliber player. And then also another thing Joel has is that he's expanded to have more of a jump shot. He actually can shoot some three-pointers if you need him to, and he can shoot shots from the top of the arc. That's something that Shaq never really had, just didn't have the fine skills to shoot those shots. But that's something that Joel has. But Shaq was definitely better around the rim, I'd say. Joel has a lot of moves, but Shaq can just put the ball in the hoop and bully his way, which is something that Joel has a little bit of, but not a ton of. In that Joel's, even though he has a pretty big body and a good frame, he is really more of a finesse player, I'd say, than Shaq was. Shaq obviously really wasn't much of a finesse player. He did have a bit more finesse in Orlando, but still, he relied on athleticism. He actually got out on the break a lot more and would handle the ball sometimes for Orlando, which is something people don't know. But yeah, that's a little bit of a comparison there, in that basically they're just both dominant big men. And yeah, the sharpshooters on the wing are pretty similar, but like those guys really can't. You can't just ask them to go get a shot either, because they're more like guys that you dribble, penetrate, and then kick it out to them for a jump shot. They're spot-up shooters. They don't really create off the dribble. Now, you could say Dario Saric can like a little bit, just the way Nick Anderson could like a little bit, but not a ton. And as for Shaq and Joel, they're both really good in the post, but they need like a point guard to be feeding them really good passes to be most effective. You can't just give them the ball on the wing and say, okay, score. They can't really create their own shot in that way. That's a major difficulty of both of these teams, I'd say, is that they don't just have a guy to give the ball to and say, okay, score, please. They just don't have that, and that's a major weakness, whereas other teams like the Celtics, let's say, have that in Kyrie Irving or Gordon Hayward, or back in the day, the Bulls had that, and that they just gave the ball to Michael and said, okay, score, and he could just do it. But these teams don't have that, and that's really the ultimate ceiling of them, is that when plays break down and everything, they don't just have a guy that they can kick it to and say, figure something out. They have guys that can try, but they're not really best at that, or that's not one of their major assets as far as their skill repertoire. So that being said, I think that there's definitely a ceiling to this type of team. Do I see the do I see the Philadelphia 76ers ever making a finals with this core? The answer is maybe, not for sure. And I'm not counting them out either. If something happens where like Kyrie gets frustrated with the Celtics team and goes to the Knicks or something, and then Al Horford's contract is actually up this year too, so he could go somewhere else. If those two guys left this season, and then it was the Celtics core was like Hayward, Tatum, and Brown, and Aaron Baines and Terry Rozier is the starting lineup, then yeah, I'd say like Philadelphia has an equal chance, or maybe even a slightly better chance of making the finals. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen because Kyrie said he wants to stay in. Al Horford seems to be pretty content with the style that's going down in Boston and everything there. He likes the situation. So I doubt that this core is ever actually going to make an NBA Finals, which really brings into the question whether the process was worth it. You know, they basically sacrificed 2013 to 2017, I'd say. 2017 to make the process happen. So that's, let's see here, that's 4 NBA seasons. So I don't really know if that was worth it, but we will have to see. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Just a little tidbit here, not much to say it. I just found it interesting that those teams are so distinctly similar, and I hope you guys see that, and hope you guys like the video. Have a good day. Bye.